Okay, so the mic is correct. The mobile application area seems to be seminar or tutorial based. That's because of the nature of the face-to-face classes in terms of not having lectures, but having much more interactive types of environments. We identified lots of issues with Safari, the web browser, and the portfolio, which caused problems. And in fact, we identified considerable numbers of issues with the secure network on the and problems with our students logging in. And certainly from our perspective in the TLC, if we're going to continue this project, we need to sit down and have some very useful conversations with our IT staff about allowing our students to use the network in ways that they're more familiar with. The key comments was that video was basically the big winner. Very, very good for second language learners. They could review content in their own time. They could use the YouTube videos. They could reflect on what other people had done, what they'd done. They could actually look at the processes because we recorded all of the lectures done by the teacher of the class. But basically, a lot of the processing was still focused on receiving content. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you, Mike, for clarifying that. It's a bit difficult, I must admit, when the student doing the testing is actually presenting and they're in the video. So verifiable testing wasn't a problem for us because the students had, when they gave feedback, they had usernames and passwords, so we could identify them. And when they were presenting, well, it's impossible to hide. What they'd used was, again, a lot of the basic tools. Awesome Notes was quite popular with a small group of students. Evernote was more so. And Twitter in China, because many of our students, remember, were from the mainland, about half the students, and that was extremely popular. And therefore, the communication apps and the language and productivity apps were very strongly used by the student group. We also did some analysis to look at, and this is the preliminary part of the data. Unfortunately, our data sample is very, very small. So we were looking at students' approaches to learning, and we used the SPQ, which has been developed to look at the surface learning and deep learning strategies. And what we found is that, surprisingly, these are much better figures than the general population of the students doing this particular course. We've run this particular survey instrument across the entire population of students, and we find about 45% of the students in the entire cohort adopt what you call surface approaches to the learning of English language. So it's not really confidence building if you're adopting a very instrumental approach to learning what is a very challenging language for Chinese language learners. So we're doing better here, but we're also going to run the survey again at the course and see if we can look at the ways in which we've been trying to engage students in changing their minds about adopting a deeper approaches or strategies for learning English, because it is a problem. It's sort of a lot of students in Hong Kong are questioning the need for English, given that the mainland is where most of their interest lies, and therefore learning Mandarin or Putonghua is beginning to have a greater pull. I think what we've learned from the project is there are some real opportunities for more engaging forms of assessment. Certainly the levels of engagement in the classes have been very, very high, and by using the mobile tools, we've actually been able to increase the choice of assessments that we do. And the mobile tools have made the 3 sets of assessment plus the practice processes plus the peer feedback processes much, much more amenable, much easier for the students to do. It's also allowed us to highlight the best practice amongst the students. And that best practice allows students to do reflection and provide that reflection in other areas. All in all, we're quite happy. Got very, very good engagement from the students, and the motivation has been excellent. So we've actually been quite pleased with the opportunities there. The benefits, we think that we've enhanced the formation of the community quite well, and we've certainly shown that, Geoffrey, we've shown that information can be very rapidly shared. What we've done mostly for the iPhone is we've used the iPhone not so much to distribute the feedback, but to use it primarily for the media purposes. The feedback is done primarily through the portfolio and through the YouTube channel we've set up. And that seems to have worked reasonably well. We have a system at the university where we can push survey instruments out to iPhones, and we've used that to gather information about apps, about student difficulties and issues that they've faced, as well as the focus groups. It's quite clear that one of the things that's going to drive the project in the future is to find the apps that most support educational needs and have the right price, dare I say, as in, for our students, free. So price is a very interesting thing. And the other thing we've identified very clearly that is usability. You cannot assume that these so-called digitally literate generation of Prensky et al. Actually can do the content creation and the setup for more complex processes to use these devices even at this point in time. And it's quite clear that one of the things we'll do, Carolyn, is we'll do an analysis and look back over the classes in the past. Now, we can't do direct comparisons. We don't have big enough groups. But we're going to look at the kinds of performance in the past, because we do have video of some students presenting in the past in the course before it got rewritten and redeveloped. And we're going to go back and look at that and see if we can detect any better levels of learning outcomes. But we're being sensitive to the fact that it's a different group of students. One of the things that's proved incredibly useful to us is the use of the mobile cloud, particularly Twitter and Dropbox for distributing information. The one we haven't used very, very much is the context-aware stuff. And but the just-in-time and the access to content just when they need it has proved quite successful. As students have said, they can look at these things at odd times when they're actually able to do it and download it. There are still some issues to be faced in the project. At the moment, we had to find a technology-friendly teacher. Agreed, Carolyn. And we think we've got some quite interesting ways of engagement with the students and distilling that knowledge from the information provided. But the real issue for many of our teachers is that it's going to compete for the attention of it and change the power structures in the room. Because once you have these highly active classrooms, the teacher basically sits at the back and the students run the show very, very strongly. And that won't suit all domains or all domains. What we have found is it does change the information-seeking behavior of the students. Once the phones are in the room and the students have access to it in and out of classes, they are much more willing to actually use the devices to look up information instead of saying, relying on the teacher as the ultimate source of information. And, Geoffrey's right and Carolyn's right, this is a big change for many of our teachers, and therefore we need to gather some more data and find a few more teachers in our institution that are willing to work with us to do this, because we too have some plans for trying out iPads, which are much, much bigger devices, of course, and better for supporting reading and note-taking and highlighting and the like. And the second part of issues we've got, the size of the screen-based keyboard is still an issue. They're still not as fast as I thought they would be. We have identified some serious issues with our connectivity and bandwidth, and these are always going to be problems, I suspect. And at the moment, the project's not yet scalable because not everybody can afford iPhones, and astonishingly enough, not everybody wants one amongst the population. There are lots of competitors up here, sort of iPhone copies, where the interfaces are pretty awful and the functionality is extremely limited. And cost is always going to be an impact here, but recycling is huge here. There's many iPhones recycling through the system as they sort of pass their way down, because there is a culture of buying the newest and the best and the shiniest, and people who can they swap these things over as quickly as possible. So we're going to repeat the study again in second semester with another group of students. We're going to try and solve all of the infrastructure problems that we've had, and we're going to use the portfolio system and the channel we set up on YouTube to provide students with more instances of good practice and the ways in which they can establish and build their own communities. So if people want to know more about the research, then I would be happy to share that information with people. And that's my contact details in the last slide. And that's been about 1 hour, and I hope that's sufficient. So thank you all for listening, and I welcome questions.
Goes in order. Question? No, I'll direct myself to ask a question. I was really interested in perhaps the division between formative and summative types of assessments that you get the students to do, and whether you actually see any difference with their engagement with the interface and the format that you're doing. And then if you do get things like, if you do use things like the iPhone, what are the learning outcomes that you're looking for? Because presumably the format for the assessment task has to actually match the learning outcome that you're looking for. So presumably the students need to know what it is you're rewarding. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, especially when it comes to formative assessment versus summative assessment and the weightings between that, or the relative engagement of the students in those sorts of activities.
Okay. Again, it's a very broad-reaching and appropriate question, Jeff. So I'll do my best to answer it. And let me just go back to slide number. Am I permitted to go back to slide number 28? Is that okay? Because I can see a questionnaire up in front of me at the moment. Okay. Let me go back to the learning outcomes. Yeah. One of the things I didn't show is is some of the rubrics that we use in terms of gauging the assessment, and part of the process within these highly active classrooms. And this is of concern to us because I'm working with somebody who's both comfortable with technology, he's comfortable with doing things in a different way. My colleague's name is Mark Lebain. He's a very experienced language teacher. He's been at the university for a long time. He's very digitally literate. He's certainly not a digital immigrant anymore. If he is, he's well until he become a native speaker in that regard. So that sort of detail in terms of doing the assessment, but also explaining to students about how the assessment is done. And part of the peer evaluation process is for them to use these rubrics to provide feedback that's appropriate.